His huge shadow fell over her in the quiet room. "Sister," he rumbled, his dark, deep-set eyes staring directly into hers. "They have told you that you are a dry riverbed. They told you your body is a tomb, fit only for prayer." His gaze was bold, seeing not a 70-year-old nun, but a woman. "They are wrong. I am the man who brings the rain. I have come to make the barren soil live." "Take off your clothes," he said, his voice a whisper that vibrated with power. The secret was not a whisper at first. It was a scream trapped in Sister Agnes's throat. It was a tightness in her chest that felt like a stone. It was the way her simple black habit, a dress she had worn for 50 years, suddenly felt too tight around her middle. For weeks she had ignored it. Old age, she told herself. The body does strange things. But this was not a strange thing. This was a growing thing, a living thing, inside her. A 70-year-old nun. The discovery had come not with a bang, but with a quiet, terrifying certainty during her morning prayers. As she knelt on the cold stone floor of the small chapel, a flutter, faint as a moth's wing, had moved deep within her belly. It was not gas. It was not a muscle spasm. It was life. And in that moment, Sister Agnes's world, a world of quiet order, prayer, and routine, shattered into a million pieces. The convent of St. Jude was a small, quiet place on the edge of the bustling city of Abeokuta on the hill. It was a place of peace, a haven from the noisy markets and the dusty roads. Sister Agnes was the heart of that haven. She was 70 years old, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles, her eyes kind and sharp. She had been a nun since she was a young girl, her life a straight, dedicated line to God. She ran the convent's small clinic, her hands gentle as she bandaged scraped knees and soothed fevers. Everyone in the city knew and respected Sister Agnes. She was as much a part of Abeokuta on the hill as the great hill the city was named for. Now, that pillar of respectability was hiding an impossible secret. The first person to notice something was wrong was not a person at all, but the habit itself. The coarse black wool, usually loose and flowing, was becoming snug. The belt she wore around her waist, once fastened at the last hole, now strained to meet. She tried to hide it, wearing a heavier shawl, moving more slowly, but the change was undeniable. The sisters in the convent, women who had lived with her for decades, began to look at her with quiet confusion. "Sister Agnes, are you feeling well, Sister Mary?" A younger woman with a perpetually worried look asked one afternoon as they sorted herbs in the garden. "You seem heavier." Sister Agnes forced a smile, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "Just old age, my child. The body gathers weight." But Sister Mary's eyes were sharp. "It's not your face or your arms. It's right here." She gestured vaguely at Sister Agnes's middle. The panic that Sister Agnes had been holding back began to bubble up. She had to do something. She couldn't pray this away. This was not a matter of the spirit. This was a matter of the flesh. With a heart full of dread, she went to see the Mother Superior, a stern woman named Mother Evangeline. Mother Evangeline's office was sparse, containing only a wooden desk, a crucifix on the wall, and a single hard chair. She listened in stony silence as Sister Agnes, her voice trembling, confessed her fear. I believe I am with child, Mother." The silence that followed was so deep it felt like a physical weight. Mother Evangeline's face, usually a mask of pious authority, went through a series of changes, disbelief, confusion, and then a slow dawning horror. She stared at Sister Agnes like a ghost. "Agnes," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "that is not possible. You are 70 years old. You have taken your vows. You are a bride of Christ."
"I know, Mother," Sister Agnes cried, tears finally streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "I know. But it is true. I feel it. It is moving inside me." Mother Evangeline stood up, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of her desk. "This is a test," she said, more to herself than to Agnes. "A terrible, cruel test from the devil. We must be sure." They were sure 2 days later. A doctor from the city's main hospital, a kind man who was also a member of their parish, came to the convent under the cover of darkness. He examined Sister Agnes in the small infirmary, his face pale and his hands shaking as he used his equipment. And when he was done, he looked at Mother Evangeline, his eyes wide with a disbelief that mirrored her own. "There's no doubt," he said softly. "She is pregnant. The baby is strong. I would guess 4 months along." The news broke not like a storm, but like a poison seeping into the city's water supply. It started with a whisper between 2 cooks in the kitchen. It traveled to the market women who sold vegetables to the convent. From there, it spread through the city like wildfire. "Did you hear? Old Sister Agnes from St. Jude's? What about her? Is she sick? Sick? She's pregnant." At first, everyone laughed. It was a ridiculous, impossible story. A 70-year-old nun? It was a joke. But as the days passed and the whispers grew more insistent, the laughter died. A strange, heavy quiet fell over the city. People stopped and stared when a sister from St. Jude's walked through the market. They whispered behind their hands. The scandal was too big, too strange, too unbelievable to be a joke. It had to be true. The church was thrown into chaos. Bishop Okoro, a powerful and respected man, was summoned from the capital. He arrived in Abeokuta on the hill with a face like thunder. He shut himself in the convent with Mother Evangeline for a whole day. When he emerged, he looked 10 years older. He called an emergency meeting of all the priests in the city. The question on everyone's lips was the same one. A question so shocking, so profane, that no one dared say it out loud at first. But in the crowded beer halls and on the dusty street corners where men gathered to talk, the question began to surface. "How?" a man named Femi asked his friends, his voice low. "A 70-year-old woman? How is that possible?" His friend, a driver named Bello, took a long pull from his beer bottle. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and leaned in. "I'll tell you how," Bello said, his eyes dark with a mixture of awe and fear. "It wasn't a normal man. It had to be a man with a power you and I can't understand. A man with a gigantic manhood." The words hung in the air. Gigantic. The word itself was a shock. It was crude, but it felt right. It was the only explanation that seemed to fit the scale of the miracle or the horror. A normal act could not produce such an impossible result. It had to be something unnatural. The focus of the city's shock and curiosity began to shift. The mystery was no longer just about Sister Agnes. It was now about the man, the unknown, unseen man who had done this. Who was he? Where did he come from? And what kind of man was he to possess such a legendary, world-altering power? The city of Abeokuta on the hill held its breath. The scandal was no longer just a story. It was a hunt. And everyone was looking for the man with the giant shadow.
The city of Abeokuta on the hill was a pot of boiling water. The scandal of Sister Agnes was the fire beneath it. For weeks the people had talked of nothing else. The story grew with each telling. Some said it was a miracle, a sign from God. Most said it was a curse, a mark of the devil. But everyone agreed on one thing. It was impossible. And for something impossible to happen, an impossible man must have been responsible. The search for this man began quietly. Bishop Okoro, his face a permanent mask of grim determination, ordered his most trusted priests to investigate. They started with the obvious. Were there any new men in the city? Any strangers? They checked the guest houses, the markets, the construction sites. They found a few travelers, a couple of new traders, but none of them fit the profile of a man who could perform such a feat. The investigation hit a wall.
The man was a ghost. The city's men, however, were not so methodical. Their search took place in the beer halls and under the mango trees where they gathered after work. Their theories were more direct, more primal. It must have been a man of great passion, one man suggested, wiping foam from his lips. A man who could not control himself? Passion is not enough, another countered. This is a 70-year-old woman. Her time for that is long past. This was not passion. This was power. Raw power. The word power hung in the smoky air, and with that word came another whispered word that was now on everyone's tongue: gigantic. The idea was absurd, obscene, and yet it felt true. It was the only explanation that matched the scale of the event. A normal man, a normal act, could not have planted a seed in such barren soil. It had to be a man with an unnatural gift, a man whose very body was a legend. The city needed a suspect. It needed a face to put to the mystery, and it found one in the most unlikely of places. Mama Nkechi was the oldest woman in the market. Her face was a web of 1,000 wrinkles, and her back was bent like a worn-out hoe. She sold herbs and roots, and people said she knew the secrets of the soil and the spirits of the trees. She had seen everything in her long life, or so she claimed. One morning, as she arranged her bitter leaf and pungent ginger, 2 of the bishop's priests approached her. "Mama Nkechi," the older priest said, his voice gentle, "we have come to ask you a question. You know everyone in this city. Have you heard any talk, any rumors about a man of unusual strength, unusual vitality?" Mama Nkechi stopped her work. She looked from one priest to the other, her old eyes twinkling with a knowing light. She had been waiting for this question. "There are many strong men in this city," she said, her voice raspy. "Men who can lift heavy loads, men who can wrestle a goat to the ground." "This is different," the younger priest said, his face flushed with impatience. "This is about life, about a power to create life where it should not be." Mama Nkechi smiled, a slow, toothless grin. "Ah," she said, nodding her head, "you are talking about Okonjo." The name meant nothing to the priests. "Okonjo?" the older priest repeated. "Who is Okonjo?" "He is not a man of the city," Mama Nkechi explained, picking up a long, gnarled root. "He lives on the edge of the forest, where the city ends and the wild begins. He is a woodcarver, but that is not his true work. His work is with life. People go to him when the hospitals fail, when a woman cannot have a child, when a man's spirit is weak." The priests leaned in closer. "What do you mean?" "They say he has a connection to the earth," Mama Nkechi whispered, her voice dropping low. "They say he drinks a special brew from the forest that gives him the strength of a bull and the life force of a god. They say his manhood is a gift from the ancient gods, a thing of great power, a thing that can wake up what is sleeping." The priests looked at each other. This was it. This was the lead they had been looking for. A recluse, a man who lived apart, a man with a reputation for strange power. It was not proof, but it was more than they had a moment ago. "Where can we find this man?" the older priest asked. Mama Nkechi pointed a shaky finger toward the green line of trees on the horizon. "Follow the path past the last compound, you will find his hut. But be warned," she added, her eyes serious. "Okonjo is not like other men. The forest speaks through him. Do not go with anger in your hearts." The 2 priests left the market and walked toward the edge of the city. The dusty paths gave way to a narrow red dirt track that wound its way into the bush. The air grew cooler, filled with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. The noise of the city faded behind them, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant call of a bird. They soon came to a small clearing. In the center stood a simple hut made of mud and thatch, surrounded by a garden of strange-looking plants. A man was sitting on a low stool outside the hut, his back to them. He was huge, not fat, but solid, like a baobab tree. His shoulders were broad, and his back was wide. He was whittling a piece of wood with a small knife, his movements slow and deliberate. He did not seem to notice their approach, but they knew he was aware of them. The air around him felt heavy, charged. "Are you Okonjo?" the older priest called out, his voice sounding small in the clearing. The man stopped whittling. He placed the knife and the wood down carefully, as if they were sacred objects. He rose slowly to his feet and turned to face them. He was even bigger than they had thought. Tall and thick-limbed, with a chest as broad as a door. His face was calm, his eyes dark and deep. He looked at them, not with fear or aggression, but with a quiet, unnerving patience. "I am Okonjo," he said, his voice a low rumble, like stones shifting deep underground. "What do you want with me?" The younger priest, emboldened by his faith, stepped forward. "We have come from the bishop. We have come to ask you about Sister Agnes of the St. Jude Convent." Okonjo's expression did not change. He simply watched them, his gaze steady. "The holy woman," he said. "I know of her. She has a good heart. She helps the sick." "She is with child," the younger priest said, his voice rising. "An old woman with child. The city is in chaos, and we have been told of your reputation." "My reputation?" Okonjo asked, a flicker of something, amusement perhaps, in his eyes. "And what is my reputation?" "They say you are a man of great power, a man with a vitality that is not normal. They say you have a gift from the old gods." Okonjo was silent for a long moment. He looked from the priests to the deep forest behind his hut, as if listening to a voice they could not hear. Then he looked back at them. "The earth gives life," he said simply. "The sun gives warmth. The rain gives growth. These are the powers of the world. Is it strange that a man who listens to the earth, who feels the sun, who drinks the rain, is it strange that such a man is full of life?" "That is not an answer," the younger priest snapped. "Did you go to the convent? Did you touch Sister Agnes?" Okonjo took a step toward them. The priests instinctively took a step back. The man's shadow seemed to stretch and grow, falling over them like a dark blanket. His presence was overwhelming. It was not a threat of violence, but something else. A feeling of immense, ancient power. A feeling that he was connected to things they could not understand. "The city looks for a simple answer," Okonjo said. "You look for a man to blame. You look for a sin to punish. But maybe the story is not about a man at all." "What else could it be about?" the older priest asked, his heart pounding. Okonjo looked past them, toward the city in the distance. Maybe, he said, the story is about a faith that has grown old. Maybe it is about a body that has been told it is dead, but is still waiting for a reason to live. Maybe the power you are looking for is not in my body. Maybe it was in hers all along. He did not confess. He did not deny. He simply gave them a riddle, a puzzle that was more confusing than the mystery itself. The priests left the clearing, their minds reeling. They had found their suspect, but he was not a man at all. He was a force of nature. And as they walked back to the city, they realized the scandal had just become much, much bigger. The city was not just hunting for a man. It was now facing a question it did not know how to ask.
The priests returned to the city with a story that made no sense. They went straight to the bishop's residence at the cathedral. Bishop Okora was pacing in his garden, his hands clasped behind his back. The lines on his face seemed deeper than ever. "Well," he demanded, his voice sharp, "did he confess? Is he the one?" The older priest, Father Michael, shook his head. He did not confess, Your Grace, but he did not deny it either. He spoke in riddles. He spoke of the earth, of life, of power. He said the power we seek might not be in him, but in Sister Agnes herself. Bishop Okoro stopped pacing. He stared at Father Michael as if he had spoken in a foreign tongue. What nonsense is this? Are you saying an old woman, a bride of Christ, conceived on her own? This is heresy. We do not know what to say, Your Grace, the younger priest, Father John, admitted. The man, Okonjo, he is not like other men. Being near him is unsettling. It is like standing next to a deep well or a great mountain. You feel his presence. He did not seem afraid of us or of God. The bishop was furious. The priests had found a suspect, but they had returned with a philosophical puzzle. He dismissed them and slammed the door to his study. He needed an answer. The city was demanding it. The church in the capital was demanding it. He could not go back to them with riddles from a woodcarver. He had to find the truth. The truth, however, was already making its way through the quiet halls of the St. Jude convent. Sister Mary, the young nun who had first noticed Sister Agnes's changing shape, was struggling. She had been praying for guidance, for an answer to the impossible thing happening to the woman she loved like a grandmother. That afternoon, as she cleaned out the small storeroom where they kept their medicines, her hand brushed against a dusty shelf in the back. Her fingers touched a small, tightly wrapped bundle of leaves. She had seen it before, weeks ago. She had forgotten all about it. She unwrapped the leaves. Inside was a dark garnered root, unlike any she had seen. It smelled of rich soil and rain. And then she remembered. It was the day the new man had come to the convent gate. He was a woodcarver, a quiet, powerful-looking man named Okonjo. He had heard of their small clinic and had brought a gift, a carved stool for the infirmary. Sister Agnes had been the one to receive it. Sister Mary had been there, sweeping the porch. "Thank you, my son," Sister Agnes had said, her kind eyes crinkling. "This wood comes from the forest," the man had rumbled. "It has life in it. I thought it would be good for a place of healing." He had then held out the bundle of leaves. "And this is for the healer," he had said, looking directly at Sister Agnes. "A gift from the earth. It helps the body remember its own strength." Sister Agnes had taken the root with a curious smile. "Thank you, Okonjo. You are very kind." Sister Mary had thought nothing of it at the time, just a simple herbal gift. But now, holding the root in her hand, a memory stirred in her mind. A few days after that visit, she had found Sister Agnes in the garden, looking different. There was a new energy in her step, a flush on her cheek that she hadn't seen in years. "Sister Agnes, you look well today," she had said. And Sister Agnes had laughed, a rare, clear sound. "I feel well, child. I feel awake." Sister Mary's heart began to pound. She wrapped the root back in the leaves and ran. She ran to Mother Evangeline's office, her sandals slapping on the stone floors. Mother, I think I know," she gasped, bursting into the room. Mother Evangeline looked up from her prayers, startled. "What, child? Calm yourself." "The root," she cried, holding out the bundle. "The gift from the woodcarver, Okonjo. He gave it to Sister Agnes. She said it was to help the body remember its strength. And after that, she began to change." Mother Evangeline stared at the root, then at Sister Mary's frantic face. A slow, dawning realization spread across her own features. It was not a story of violation. It was not a tale of a man's sin. It was something else entirely. Something stranger. "We must go to the bishop," she said, her voice filled with a new and terrible urgency. "Now." An hour later, a small, tense procession walked down the path to the forest. Bishop Okoro, his face grim, Mother Evangeline, holding Sister Mary's arm, and two of the priests. They found Okonjo not whittling wood, but planting a small sapling in the clearing before his hut. He worked with the same slow, deliberate care. He saw them coming and stood up, wiping the dirt from his hands onto his pants. He waited for them, his expression unreadable. Bishop Okoro stepped forward, holding the bundle with the root inside. "Woodcarver," he said, his voice cold. "Do you know what this is?" "It is a gift from the earth," Okonjo replied calmly. "It is poison," the bishop thundered. "It is a dark charm you used to seduce a holy woman, to bring shame upon the church and upon this entire city." Okonjo looked at the bishop, and for the first time there was a flicker of sadness in his deep eyes. "You see only darkness, man of God," he said softly, "because you have forgotten the light. You have forgotten that life is not a sin. It is a miracle." "He gave it to her," Sister Mary blurted out, stepping forward. "He gave it to Sister Agnes. She changed after she took it." Okonjo nodded slowly. "I did. The holy woman, Agnes. She has spent 50 years giving her life to others. She has poured all of her love, all of her life force into the sick and the poor. Her own body had become a dry riverbed. It had forgotten how to flow. I did not give her a child. I only gave her a drop of water from the great river of the earth. I reminded her body that it was still alive." He looked at the bishop, his gaze unwavering. "The power you all whisper about, the gigantic manhood you search for, you are looking for it in the wrong place. It is not in one man's body. It is in the soil. It is in the rain. It is in the seed that can sleep for 100 years and still grow. It is the power of life itself. It is a force of nature. I did not violate Sister Agnes. I honored her. I honored the life that was still in her." Silence fell over the clearing. The bishop stood frozen, the bundle of leaves held in his hand. Okonjo's words were not a confession of a crime. They were a statement of a truth so profound, so contrary to everything the bishop believed, that he had no way to fight it. How could he punish this man? For what? For giving an old woman a root? For reminding her body of its own vitality? The act was not of lust, but of nurturing, of awakening. The bishop looked at Mother Evangeline, who looked back at him with wide, uncertain eyes. He looked at Sister Mary, whose face was streaked with tears of understanding, not of horror. The scandal of a Becchiota on the hill would not end with a punishment. It would not end with a stoning or a jail cell. It ended there in the dusty clearing, with a woodcarver speaking of the earth, and a bishop holding a simple root. The story of Sister Agnes did not fade. It changed. It was no longer a story of shame. It became a legend, a story told to young women to never give up on their bodies, and to young men to understand that true power is not about taking, but about giving life. And the man they called Okonjo, the man with the giant shadow, was never seen as a sinner. He was remembered as a man who understood the deep, wild, and miraculous secret of the earth, the secret that life, in its purest form, is the most powerful force in the world, and sometimes all it needs is a little help from the soil to remind it how to grow.